Through the Gates is produced under the support of the Coloradans for Responsible Wildlife Management to enhance, promote, and defend the North American model of wildlife conservation and responsible wildlife management. That's our mission. We're engaged in fighting at every level so that wildlife management remains science-based and conservation continues to work for our wildlife. To learn more and join the movement, visit SaveTheHuntColorado.com. The North American model of wildlife conservation is the greatest conservation model in the world. It's a success story that should be shared and celebrated because everybody is a part of it. So we're here for another episode of Through the Gates podcast, Through the Gates to Save the Hunt. We're actually in a cabin in the Yukon Territories, and I'm here with a good friend, James O'Farrell. James is with Grizzly Creek Lodge, and I've been up here trapping for the last 10 days and trapping on his line, learn a little bit about the Northern Lights, trying to figure out just where we actually fit in from a state side of things. But we're going to have a little bit of a conversation about what's been going on in his life, how trapping plays an intimate role in the way that him and his family live. And so James, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Like you said, my family has owned and operated Grizzly Creek Lodge since, pretty much since I was born. My dad started there actually a little bit before I was born, but I spent every summer of my life out there. Got involved in the trapping side of things when I was 9. So that's when we started just mostly trapping things for the fur market. We didn't get started in the tourism side of trapping until it was, they created a license for it essentially in the Yukon. That would have probably been 10, 12 years ago. So between that and then got involved in the hunting side of things at 15. So have it rounded out where we can pretty much spend most of the year in the bush.
And you've been doing that for how long on your end?
On my end, the trapping since I was 9, the fishing every summer of my life, and then the commercial trapping side of things for the last 10 years.
And if you didn't trap, you're married, you got 2 kids.
Yep.
Your wife is a Tlingit.
Tlingit First Nation.
Yep. Native American, which I asked you that Native American side of things. Well, it's North America.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And but if you didn't trap, what would that do to you and your livelihood as far as being able to provide for yourselves?
It would pretty much alter everything that we do because you'd have to find some type of employment that you could be gone the rest of the year, right? Because a lot of my income is from the fishing and then from the hunting in the fall. So there's not a lot of employers in the Yukon to begin with, and then you'd have to find one that we say, okay, yeah, I'm going to be gone, 6 months out of the year type of a thing. There's not always employers like that, especially in the remote communities. You'd be hard pressed to necessarily find one.
You guys are pretty self-sufficient. I mean, you rely on wild game. I mean, you don't get everything from the field, but you don't get everything from the store either, correct?
No, that's exactly right. And, in the remote communities like, Watson Lake that we drove through or Tagish where I live when I'm not out here, you almost everybody does because it's kind of the way it is. You don't really have a lot of other options. Obviously, you are getting some stuff from town, but the options just aren't as varied as they would be in a bigger, more metropolis area.
Right.
Yeah.
Kind of give an explanation, definition of where we're at geographically. I flew into Whitehorse on the 18th of February,
right?
And so give a synopsis of what it took to get where we're at.
Yeah, so from Whitehorse, I think it's right around 500 kilometers to Watson Lake. So depending on road conditions, I think we made it down in like 5 hours, something like that. Roads weren't bad. Hopefully they're good on the way home tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, from Watson Lake there, it's about another 45 minutes to an hour by truck. And then maybe 20, 30 minutes by snow machine to get to the cabin?
Pretty close.
Yeah.
Across like Frozen Lake.
Yeah.
It's not like you're on a county road by any means.
No, exactly. So it's a good day's journey from Whitehorse to get out here.
And then our daily treks have been, what did we figure we traveled in 10 days?
Be pretty close to 500 kilometers.
Yeah. So it's pretty strenuous endeavor.
Right.
As I joked with you, riding on the back of the 2-person skidoo, is somewhat challenging at times, depending on the snow conditions.
Yeah.
And how come you don't use two machines? The people were going to ask me that.
We started out doing it that way, and basically boils down to a lot of the guys coming up haven't ridden a snow machine a lot, especially in conditions like the one trail up there that you like so much. Lots of side hills and that kind of thing, and basically people lost some enjoyment because they were upside down as much as they were right side up, which ends up being even more tiring and even less fun. So
one of the things too is what I saw is we're going across the lakes, and we're going up and down rivers, and we're going across some streams. A lot of that's froze, but the weather conditions that we've got right now, that seems like a significant challenge for somebody who's not privy to the situation. They'd be following you, but if they didn't know when to, as you say, pin it, to try to get across the overflow, there's a challenge there, but there's a safety concern as well.
Yeah, no, that is another thing too. There is a certain amount of reading snow conditions and ice conditions that definitely plays into it. Like we were discussing on the river there, if it's blue, you're generally fine. If it's starting to look dark, then, you want to pin it.
Yeah, I want to pin it,
as we were saying. So yeah, there is definitely that aspect too.
Because I think a week or two ago, your temperatures here were about what?
2 weeks to 10 days, 2 weeks ago, we were a lot colder, kind of averaging more around that minus 30 Celsius, obviously. But so much better ice conditions then. We've kind of had a warm spell here, which has made things a little bit more, you just want to keep an eye on it, especially with the river.
Yeah, we were at a beaver lodge today, and you had planted your chisel, and I saw the entire surrounding area sink about 6 inches. Yeah, like for maybe, I don't know, 100 square yards.
Right, yeah, gets your attention. Hey?
Yeah, it gets your attention. I'm glad I'm standing on the lodge because I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. The water's not warm.
No, and the ice in most of those locations, you've been sawing it out with a chainsaw, to be able to put in the traps in front of the lodges. After you dig out 3 foot of snow, you go down through the ice. But a lot of that ice is 18 inches, 2 foot thick.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, so in most areas, the ice is still safe. You just have areas like we seen earlier today there, where you might have a spring or something on the bottom of the lake where it's coming up, and that's where you'll start to get those holes opening up in the warmer temperatures. And so the majority of it's still fine. It's just those areas that you want to watch out for.
You think you're probably going to get another cold spell before this is done and over with?
Yeah, I think we'll have to pay the piper before spring. Really.
Yeah. So what made you get into this? I know that your family was kind of the guiding light to it. You could have went another path somewhere, but what made you continue to do the hunting, the guiding, the trapping side of things? And then how did you find a woman that would be willing to do that? Because there's a lot of people out there that say, well, my wife doesn't do this or my wife doesn't do that. I'm a lucky guy because my wife, she allows and does this as a business, everything that I do. But how did all this play out from you from a family side of things?
Honestly, it was just kind of one of those things where I was lucky enough to be born into it, and I was somebody that liked it as well. And like we were talking about earlier, it doesn't always work out that way. You have people that like it but weren't born into it, people born into it that don't like it. I just happened to kind of win the lottery that way, and that I was born into it, and it's what I wanted to do. So really started actually taking clients fishing and stuff like that at 15, and that's when I got into the hunting guiding part of it as well. And I just, from that point on, I've been so busy that I haven't even thought of doing something else.
It's what you do.
Yeah, it's what we do, and it's not just a job, it's a lifestyle, right? So you do it like yourself with the trapping stuff. You do it because it just becomes your life.
That's what I say when I'm testifying a lot and telling people and talking to people and trying to reason with them that it's not something that I do, it's who I am.
Right, exactly.
And it's hard for them to quantify or qualify that in any way, shape, or form because they don't understand. They don't understand the solitude. They don't understand the peace and the well-being that you get out of it, and they don't understand the self-sufficiency.
Right. Yeah, no, that's exactly right, and that's kind of ties into to finding a partner that likes that kind of thing as well. My wife, as you said, is Tlingit First Nations, and so she's got a family history that goes way back, with that type of a lifestyle. And so she was on board kind of right from the beginning. We grew up together. Yukon's not a large place, so it I wouldn't say everybody knows everybody, but a significant portion of the population if you know a handful of people. But it worked out really good for me that way because she really values, like you said, the self-sufficiency. The meat, the wild game. It's hormone free. It's ethically raised because it's running around doing what it wants, and so there's kind of that whole aspect of it too, right? It's everything's renewable and clean. It's like the best free range meat that you can find, and the fur is the same thing. It's a renewable resource, and we're basically harvesting that harvestable surplus, and it just fits in with the way we view things.
Talking about the renewable resource that you and I know that this is, you were assisting on the trap line next to the one that you actually had the concession on.
Right.
Give us a little bit of background on what it takes to get a concession, and it's for people in the States that don't understand whether they trap public or private land. You're the only one that traps this specific concession.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah. So we have a trapping concession system. And basically, when they were originally drawn up, we allocated them from the government. But now, basically, if you want to own one, you have to purchase it privately from another individual. So you not only have to go through the process of becoming a licensed trapper, you take the course, go through the program, and that allows you to buy a trap. And then once you own a trapping concession, that area is it's yours to look after, sort of a thing. So,
and then like on Joel's, then you do the assist, because
right.
You're trapping part of it or for a specific species that maybe he's not.
Yeah, exactly. Or in our case, there was lots and lots of willows and the trail's not very nice. And he figured if he gave me an assist, I'd cut them out.
That's a good trade then.
Right. Well, it would have been.
Right. Unless you're riding on the back of the Skidoo and waiting for you to hopefully break them off so they don't hit me in the face.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
But the total line that we did, I mean, that long route is a 9 or a 10 hour route,
right?
Typically.
Right.
And if you break down out there,
yeah,
it's a 25 or a 30 kilometer walk back to here.
Yeah.
But that's if you walk on the trail, hopefully with the that the Skidoo made. It's
right.
You're not walking through this stuff.
No.
3.5, 4, 5 foot of snow.
No, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, it definitely pays. Like nowadays we've got the satellite communications and stuff. So I'd have people that I can send a text to if there's a problem, and they would come and get you. But it definitely gives you a lot of respect for the people that did not have that.
Oh yeah.
Obviously you carry things with you so that you can spend the night if you need to. But it is kind of nice knowing that you can hit that button and have somebody coming to pull you out.
But it's not going to be like AAA auto service where they're not going to show up. It might be today,
right?
It might be tomorrow.
Yeah.
So you need to still be prepared to be able to take care of yourself.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And the cabin that you got here, plus the bunkhouse that you've got, and you've got a skin and shed, and you've got a privy up on the hill. Those are all part of the concession, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So it gives you basically when you own the concession, you have the commercial trapping rights for the area. And then anything trapping related, so you can cut trails, you can improve the area as much as you want to, as long as it's within reason trapping related.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The marten that we've got, what your typical trap line is, you've got lynx, wolverine, marten, wolf,
right?
And then we tried for some otter and beaver and stuff, which you catch occasionally, but we weren't successful this trip.
Right.
What's your favorite?
My favorite, it would have to be probably split between lynx and wolf. Wolf, just because they're really good at, as you saw, they're really good at making a fool out of you once you think you know what you're doing. So that's always fun. And cats, just because they're just such an interesting animal. They're a really neat predator.
How many wolverines do you typically catch a year?
I usually average about 3 here. It's kind of normal. They travel a lot. So they kind of come through sporadically. You set in areas where you historically know that they travel, and then you just kind of wait. They cover such a big area that it's not like you'll have wolverine that are just staying in your concession. It's more like they're traveling through, and you just get ready for them, and then it's a waiting game.
Yeah, and one thing in the States too that a lot of people deal with, and while I run a long line for damage control purposes and with a 30-day exemption permit, that's part of our nuisance wildlife business that we have.
Right.
We'll travel from place to place to place with a pickup. A lot of people that travel in the States do similar type stuff, but maybe it's more avocationally related. But you're here typically for about 2.5, 3 months in this general locale.
Right.
And some people would say maybe that you over harvest. If they were to say that you're in a spot too long, what would be your answer?
Well, basically, I guess that, my dad had this trap line before me. And at the rate things are going, my son will be able to trap it after I'm gone. That's, you're not really trapping an area out. You're taking that harvestable surplus. And actually, like we saw with the Joel's line that I had the assist on, it hadn't been trapped in at least probably 4 years. And it had significantly less population of fur bearers on it than the line that I'm trapping every year.
And prey animals too.
Oh, absolutely.
Less grouse, less squirrels, less rabbits, and less everything else. I mean, there was a lot of miles in there. We didn't see a track.
Yeah.
Then you come into your area where you've regularly and consistently harvested stuff, and for the most part, there's something all over the place.
Right. And I think what you're seeing there is that peaks and valleys of cycles. On that line, the predators probably got to a point where they harvested a lot of the prey animals around there, and when those prey animals crashed, the predators crashed as well. As where on my area where I'm trapping consistently, you're kind of leveling out those peaks and valleys. The predator population is never getting high enough to completely wipe out the prey population, and things just kind of stay even keel and stable.
You got moose here.
Yep.
Caribou here.
Not this time of year. In the fall, you'll find them down on the Coal River. But they don't winter here.
And the wolves that come through, as we saw, they don't live here. They come through here because they're hunting as they go.
Yep.
But you'll typically have wolves come through every 2 weeks or so.
Yep, approximately every 2 weeks. Yep, depending on what they're finding for game, obviously. But our game densities are less dense than what you guys have down there, just due to climate. So it's the wolves hunting big ungulates. They're sort of on a loop, constantly traveling and finding stuff to hunt.
And you've got black bears, grizzly bears.
Yep.
What else you got here?
As far as big game, that's kind of the majority of it right in this area. Grizzly bear,
Deep in different locations and stuff.
Yeah, sheep in different locations, just not down in this area. But
you ever been checked by a game warden on your line?
No, on my line, no.
Could they find your line?
Yep, I've invited them out for tea.
Really?
Yep. Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Cool. And you got fishing right outside. I mean, 35 feet from the cabin.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And the fish you got are mostly pike here.
Yeah, pike, and then a whitefish population that they eat. But yeah.
How deep is this lake?
I haven't graphed it, but just based on jigging, I don't think you'd be able to find a spot more than maybe 50, 60 feet in there. Yeah.
Which is pretty deep if you drop a sled through there.
Yeah, it's definitely not something how to do.
No.
Yeah.
And approximately how big is this particular lake?
Probably 6 kilometers in length would be about what I'd put it at.
Mm-hmm.
At the widest point, it might be 1 kilometer. So that would be...
That's pretty good size, though. I mean, just to give people an idea of just the terrain that we're in and just how vast it is.
Right.
And then there's drainages and tributaries that cut off of that in different locations. And we went high, and then we went far, and we went down to the Coal River. And, just looking at this and trying to get a geographical mindset of where things are, it's vast country.
Yeah, no, it definitely is that. We're lucky in that we have so much kind of open space, compared to our population.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a blessing. If you like, remote places that don't have a lot in it.
And some people don't.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah.
And some people don't like city places, and there's plenty of those that anybody can visit.
Yeah.
So when you get done, we go back tomorrow. You're going to take me back. I catch a plane out on Saturday. What's the next several weeks look like for you?
I'm going to stick around. I'm going to come back out with the family, and we're going to do a little bit more with the extended wolf season, a little bit more of that stuff. And then once we kind of wind down with that, it's going to be starting to gear up for fishing season, really. It's kind of getting to be that close to that time of year anyways, when we start switching gears from the trapping stuff and preparing for the fishing.
And your kids are homeschooled?
Yep. In Tagish there isn't a public school, so and also just with our lifestyle, we're back and forth from the bush so much that definitely a better fit.
And they go with you during the fishing season, and they're at camp all the time. And
exactly.
And that's a float plane fly-in to that. And your mom and dad run that with you.
It's we don't have any employees that aren't family. It's just a family-run business. We kind of keep it small, and it's a fun way to spend the summers for sure.
Kind of staying in the trapping conversation, I looked through a bunch of the laws and rules and regulations, and they consider it to be commercial.
Right.
In the States, it's almost like it's a taboo reference to say commercial. The animal activists or animal rights extremists assume that we are violating the North American model of wildlife conservation because we're commercializing fur.
Okay.
But under the model, fur is a legitimate use.
Right.
And the commercialization of that is legitimate, that they continually not represent. They can continually not acknowledge that it's part of the model. The model was created to talk about market hunt, talk about migratory birds and so forth. But fur, as an example, especially when it's an abundant resource that's highly regulated and appropriately managed, there's a provision. We go on the same principles of what you guys do just because of the North American model. But when you get into the commercialized side of things, there's a lot of specificity as far as laws, rules, and regulations that you have to adhere to just to be able to do this.
Yeah.
Wolves, wolverine, and lynx all need to have documentation about the harvest and about the transport or utilization. Explain that.
Yeah. So because they're CITES animals, basically we have to document, what line we caught them on, the date we caught them, whether they're male or female, the method of harvest. All of that gets documented. And then before they can get shipped out of the Yukon, they also have to get an export permit and inspected by customs officials. So there is no ambiguity in any part of the process.
Do you think it's necessary to change the ideology of people, or do you think that you need to modify our position about what we do with wildlife and fur-bearing animals?
Honestly, I think that we have a method that works, and it's provable that it works. We can look at really good success stories of game management. So yeah, I don't think that basing a system on somebody else's opinion would be a good way to go about it.
Stick with facts and science and data and the not so much anecdotal, but the boots on the ground experience.
Right. We have solid numbers and data. So why would we base management practices on somebody's guess or opinion?
When you and I talked about this at length, to some point, maybe nausea, that people that don't understand about wildlife management and resources of abundant resources like this, they wouldn't know whether it was here or not, unless we were actually harvesting it.
Right.
If there wasn't wildlife managers to appropriately adhere to the laws, rules, and regulations that were created for sustainable management practices in perpetuity, the antis wouldn't know whether these animals lived here or not. But if we weren't harvesting it, they would assume.
Right.
They would assume that it was being taken care of. There would be no fact to that.
No, exactly. And then you're talking about preservationists versus conservationists. It sort of makes you wonder, preserving them for who? If you're preserving it to such a point that nobody can go there, nobody can. It makes you wonder what the end goal is, right? It's almost like they like the idea of something rather than the reality of it.
My grandpa used to say when my grandma was going to do preserves, he says, "Why do we call them preserves?" She said, "We're preserving." He said, "You should call them conserves."
Right.
He said, "Because our goal is to process them so we can eat them."
Right.
Preserve is put it up and let it sit. And she says, "Well, you're just splitting hairs." Not when you get into the preservation side of things.
Right.
Preservation is to pretty much set it on a shelf.
Right.
Conservation is to pretty much conserve it and utilize it appropriately.
Right. And the problem is, you put stuff back on a shelf and say that you're never going to touch it, they get dusty, and you don't really keep track of what's going on with it. As for conservation, like what you and I are both doing, we contribute to the data that our managers have, that helps them figure out the best way to manage these wildlife populations. A lot of the data on population numbers and stuff, at least in the Yukon, comes from trappers for the fur bear side of things, hunters for the hunting side of things. That's who's, helping to sort of prove where these animals are, what dates they're moving around, and
if there's problems.
Exactly.
If there's problems or concerns or things that need to be modified. Without that data, without the utilization, without the participation in the resource, in pursuing the resource, there's not any of that information that's there.
Right.
I mean, I'll read something in here. That talks about First Nation trappers and trapping for food. It talks as trapping as a commercial activity. If you intend to sell fur-bearing animal pelts or other non-edible products or goods manufactured from them, then you are taking part in a commercial activity. I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
It says, in accordance with Section 16.4.5 and 16.4.11 of all the Yukon First Nations final agreements and Section 12.3.10 of Appendix C of the Gwitch Comprehensive Land Claim Agreement, commercial activities are subject to the Wildlife Act and regulations, as well as laws regulating trade. You will need to get a trapping license or an assistant trapper license and follow the Wildlife Act and regulations. These are like cross-pollination of what you and I are versus what your spouse, Marilyn, is.
Right.
Because you've got subsistence hunting, fishing, and trapping that goes along with, and this is a combination of that. So you got trapping in the Yukon regulation summary of 24-25, and then subsistence hunting, fishing, and trapping by First Nations. What's that word? Inuvialuit?
Yeah, that's as good.
Yeah, Inuvialuit and other indigenous peoples in the Yukon.
Right.
There's a lot of information in here that talks about traditional territory and subsistence harvest and what people can and can't do and how they can do it once they actually harvest it. Right. And how it needs to be reported and documented. This isn't something to where in the United States or in Canada, that you just go out willy-nilly and start harvesting things at will. There's a process, a procedure, there's a training program, there's accountability, there's transparency.
Right.
Some people don't really realize the benefits of doing what you and I do. I do it in the States and you do it up here.
Right.
How do you try to cross that to get some knowledge to people that don't understand what you do, whether it's people coming in fishing, or maybe it's people in your community, or maybe it's just tourists that you deal with in general?
Honestly, it just comes down to education, and most people are quite reasonable when you start to, explain things like you are, that there's a method to it. It's not chaos, it's a very well managed, and nothing's perfect. Every place has problems, but for the most part, it's very, very well managed and very well regulated. And it's something that we keep an eye on. The animal populations, the regulators always have a finger on the pulse of what's going on out there, and they regulate accordingly. So I think that most people, once they understand that, it makes sense.
Especially when they figure out that there's actually some oversight.
Right.
Yeah, actually some accountability. You've got a Renewable Resources Council. The traditional territories of most Yukon First Nations with the final agreement have a Renewable Resource Council. First Nations and Yukon governments nominate council members for appointment. It's interesting because we have game commissions in the state,
right?
In the states, and there's a variety of individuals that get appointed in those positions depending on what state you're from and the election process that goes along and who gets appointments. If you had the opportunity to tell somebody from your experience, 17 to 20, 25 years of experience, have things changed so dramatically that you as a conservationist, as a sportsman in the Yukon, are you concerned about the fur bearer management from what you've seen over the course of your life?
No, I think that we have a system that works. And I'm confident that if there ever is a problem, the system will address it. I think that it's a good system. Like I said, my father trapped this trapline, I trap it, and I'm not seeing a decline. I'm seeing things working as they should, and we're keeping an eye on the populations.
Everything goes through ebbs and flows and peaks and valleys.
Yep.
When you're there, part of it every year, over and over and over, you can back off on your harvest,
Yep.
or you can increase your harvest depending on the population densities that you're seeing. But I mean, you're hunting and you're fishing and you're trapping essentially in the same locations,
Yep.
over and over and over. Your dad runs one trap line in one spot, you run another one. But you've got trapper friends that are all over the place, and you communicate back and forth.
Right.
You brought me in. We went from Whitehorse to Watson Lake. We went and got my trap.
Mm-hmm.
There's this network, this conduit of information distribution and gathering that I saw, and that was a very short time that I had a chance to see it.
Right.
Your communication on the inReach or anything that you've done prior to me coming that you were talking about since I've been here, it's pretty remarkable that even a tight-knit community that is very, very, very vast,
right,
is closely monitored within each other. You kind of got an idea of what Joel's doing or what
Yep.
Jordan's doing, and they kind of got an idea what you're doing.
Yep.
Not everybody knows everything about everybody, but you got a pretty good idea on the harvest and the populations and how successful people are.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's always good to, compare notes, different people in different areas. We were talking about on part of this line, 6-7 years ago, there was a forest fire. And exactly like you said, forest fires, while they end up being beneficial, they can wipe out a lot of small mammals, mice and voles and things like that. So there was a several year period where you just had a forest fire. So you back off on the marten harvest, right? You're going to let them get reestablished and let the undergrowth come back up. So the voles and rabbits and everything move back in. And it's, you keep track of what's going on and you adjust and manage accordingly.
If you want to support a company that supported the efforts to defeat Proposition 127, then you need to support Davis Tent. Davis Tent has provided quality canvas goods for outdoorsmen for the last 50 plus years. For more information, go to davistent.com. If you want to support another business that was instrumental in helping us defeat Proposition 127, check out Salida Gun Shop. Salida Gun Shop in Salida, Colorado provides quality products, expertise, and knowledge from individuals that actually do what they sell. Go to salidagunshop.com. Listen to the advice of Cameron Haynes and support companies that are supporting your cause and your efforts. Minturn Anglers is one of those companies. Minturn Anglers provides product and fishing excursions in Colorado and are second to none. For more information, go to minturnanglers.com.
We talked during the last 10 days about trials and tribulations of just trying to stay alive in this governmental landscape that we both have to deal with.
Right.
Explain to our listeners or viewers, and we would encourage people to view on the YouTube sites, because the last one that we did with Devin Jaffe was a bird of prey
Right.
specialist and who hunts with birds of prey. Just to see the furs that you have and what you've accumulated, it's worth watching this stuff on YouTube as opposed to just listening to it as a podcast. And that's what we're trying to do, is give some people some visualization. But from COVID's perspective, give us a visualization of what you had to deal with during COVID when it came to trapping, how the country was shut down, and how that dramatically affected your ability to be able to turn around and do what you needed to do from a family perspective.
Right. It kind of affected everything. Sort of talk about a global shared experience, but the Yukon Territory was shut down entirely, as was most of Canada. But not only were we not allowed to have people, enter the country, we couldn't have interprovincial travel for quite some time. And so it completely shut down the tourism side of things. But then the cascading effects of that was nobody could travel to go to the auctions.
For the fur auctions.
For the fur auctions, yeah. And so you almost had an economic 1-2 punch of, okay, no tourism. Oh, and by the way, fur sales aren't really gonna go down the way they should. So it was definitely a difficult couple of years where a person had to really be.
You had no fishing.
No fishing,
no hunting.
No.
I mean, you could do it for yourself, but you didn't have anybody coming in to do it.
No, exactly.
And then you trapped for yourself, but then you had a surplus of furs that were essentially not so much worthless, they were unsellable.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yep. So a person had to kind of, get creative, like we were talking about, spend a little bit of time picking morel mushrooms, a little bit of time trying to do some carpentry. And it really gave me an appreciation for just, how important a person's vocation is, when that's what you do and that's what you've spent your life doing. It's not like you can just, pick up at 30 years old and say, well, I'm going to be a doctor. Right. It doesn't work that way.
Well, and it's funny you say that, because as long as I've been doing what I'm doing, I've had people that don't want me to do this.
Right.
And they say, find another job.
Right.
And I'm like, no. I mean, why should I be the one that has to go find a job? Because you don't like what I do. You don't have any basis to share with anybody that indicates what I do is wrong. It's just that you don't like it.
Right.
You were put in a particular position. A lot of people in the Yukon were, and all across Canada and in the United States. But when you were told you couldn't do this or couldn't do that, what did you think that was going to last like a week or two or a month or?
Yeah, in the beginning, we didn't think it would last that long. You kind of hold that hope that this will be over in 2 weeks to flatten the curve, right? And then as weeks turn into months and months start to turn into years, you don't know what to think. You got to a point where you really didn't know what was going on.
And essentially, it lasted how long for you guys up here?
It all kind of runs together, but there was 2 years that tourism did not happen. Period. Yeah. And then there was some openings after that with restrictions, and then of course you've got to sort bookings out and all that stuff. So there was after effect, but the worst of it was sort of that initial.
What'd you do money wise?
Well, we had been in a position where we'd saved up to build a house, actually. So we were fortunate in that regard. So we were able to kind of squeak through using some of those savings, as well as what we could get for a little bit of construction here and a little bit of that there. And
yeah, but it's not like stuff is cheap up here.
No, Canada's kind of going through an inflationary period, and yeah, cost of living is high for sure.
For people that listen, I think we figured there was 3.8 liters per gallon. What's a liter of fuel?
When we went through Watson Lake there to buy the grade with that runs well in the snow machines, sort of the mid grade, the premium there, I think it was right around $1.92 a liter, so just under $2.
So you're talking about $8 a gallon, close to it,
right?
Yeah. And people in the States are saying that they're griping about $2.50, $3 a gallon,
right?
And you'd probably like that.
Well, yeah.
You would like that a lot,
right?
We talked about the price of like your snow machine,
right?
Like your snowmobile. In the States, we figure maybe $12,000 to $15,000. Yours was close to 20,
right? Yeah,
And stuff doesn't get cheaper at any other level, depending on whatever it is, whether it's ammunition, whether it's groceries, whether it's clothes.
Right.
It's all costly.
Yep, and a big part of that is just the remoteness. We're sort of at the end of the line for shipping anything, So it and that all adds up, right? As well as the inflation and what have you. So nothing's cheap up here anymore.
You get a chance to go to the States every once in a while, but you haven't been for a while.
No, I haven't been for a while. We were talking about that earlier, and actually, the last time I was in the States at all would have been Skagway. Alaska's pretty similar to here, but I haven't been in the lower 48 for a good 6 or 8 years.
And when you go, what part of the States do you like?
Honestly, I'd like to see more of it, but I'm mostly visiting family in Missouri, California, stuff like that. Missouri's a nice state.
You don't go there in July when it's hot and humid.
No, generally, no.
Probably deer season.
Yeah, usually around deer season when it's cold and humid.
Oh, yeah, it kind of hits you a little bit.
It does, yeah. It seeps through more than the dry cold does.
And you mentioned Skagway, and Skagway is in Alaska, but there's a road and a train that goes from Skagway to just south of Whitehorse, correct?
Yep. It goes to Carcross. Yep, kind of part of the old Gold Rush route.
And then Whitehorse is just south of Dawson City.
Probably about 6 hours.
Is it?
Yep, about 6 hours.
And that's where the Klondike Gold Rush was.
Yeah,
or was a White Pass.
Yeah, White Pass is where the train comes over from Skagway to Carcross. But
yeah. And so there's a lot of history here. I mean,
yeah,
it's not a long history,
right?
But there's a lot of history.
Yep, there's a lot of history, and it, like you say, it a lot of it took place within the last just couple generations. It really wasn't that long ago. It's a pretty neat place to live. A lot of interesting history.
Talk a little bit about your dad. You mentioned he's got a storied background. So he came up from California, I guess, and was a professional fighter and did the Iditarod dog race.
Yukon Quest.
Yukon, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Very similar race.
Yeah. And so all of that kind of plays into an individual living in the Yukon.
Yeah, it's interesting. A person, wonders where choices lead them in life. And it's, my father was originally born in California His family moved up because his dad was a cowboy on the gang ranch. They moved up to British Columbia when my father was quite young. And then he ended up meeting my mother in Missouri when he was stationed there in the U.S. military. So it's kind of an interesting turn of events that leads somebody from California and somebody from Missouri to, end up in a fishing and hunting and trapping business in the Yukon Territory. It's truth is stranger than fiction.
A little bit different.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned the dog mushing, but
Right.
did you do that as a family, or was that just for him on a competition level?
He was doing it a lot on a competition level. We kind of switched gears from he kind of switched gears from the dog mushing to the trapping when I was about 9. So I remember the dog mushing, but when he sold the dogs and we got our first trap line, that's kind of where my memory starts to kick in a little bit more, for sure.
A lot of what you guys do up here is travel by snow machine, and you travel by float plane.
Yep, that's right.
Airplanes are a big deal.
Yep.
Not roads go everywhere. Now people have cars and they travel back and forth, but a lot of the transportation is by air or on the snow.
Yeah, exactly. Because we don't have a network of roads. We kind of have a couple that go through the middle, and then any of the the outdoor sportsman's type activities you're often accessing by either snow machine or float plane or horseback or something along those lines. Yeah.
Your wife, explain a little bit about her background and then what you guys try to mesh your life in with hers or her traditional side of things.
Right. So she grew up in Whitehorse area. Her family's from Carcross, which is about 20 minutes from where I'm at in Tagish. So we knew each other growing up and kind of had similar interests. We kind of wanted to go the same direction, sort of a self-sustaining lifestyle was what we were interested in. And that sort of fit in with her background, especially with her grandmother, who was a very interesting woman. Did a lot of moose hunting and that type of thing for her family. So it kind of wanted to continue on down that pathway, her family history and my family history, and we were both kind of pointed in the same direction, and it just worked out.
That's cool.
Yeah,
she does traditional crafts.
Yep, she's trying to get back into it a lot more now. The 2-year-old is now to a point where it can sort of keep itself alive for more than 2 minutes at a time. Yeah, exactly. So she's getting a little bit more time to, how it is with kids.
Yeah.
She's got more free time now to do stuff, and she does hats and mitts.
That's cool.
That type of a thing.
That's cool. More traditional type stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
But utilization, it's not like it's collector stuff. I mean, these products can be utilized and they've been part of use in cold climate, Alaska, northern Canada for centuries.
Yeah, and it's interesting because every family kind of has their own twist on things. Like once you know what to look for, you might see a pair of mucklucks on display and go, it looks like the Grant family did those. Each family has their own interpretation of how, different patterns and that type of thing. So it's there's a lot to it. Really,
you mentioned one thing when we were traveling today about a buffalo hide that you scrape, and that you're hoping to get something done with that. What is that?
I harvested a bison a few years ago and ended up scraping off all of the hair. So I ended up with a good chunk of rawhide from it. But the plan is to get the hair woven into yarn, like a wool yarn product. My wife does some boiled wool stuff that's quite utilitarian, so we wanted to try and see how the bison wool would work for that. So I'll let you know when that comes. Comes to fruition.
Yeah,
still waiting on the yarn.
You'll see how that works. That'd be kind of cool to see because you showed me the boiled wool mitts that you've got, and they're really, really heavy duty. I mean, they're I don't understand the entire process, but it's not like any wool that most people would ever see.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of a mitt would initially get knit about the size of a sweater and then just boiled and shrunk down. So it makes a durable product that you're not going to wear out in one trapping season.
And they're warm.
They're warm. Yeah, exactly.
Do you wear much fur yourself?
Yeah, I had a really nice otter hat that I haven't worn for a long time. I mentioned a new dog. It's like 8 said hat. Yeah.
The dog liked the otter.
Yeah, the dog liked the otter. So,
if you had your druthers I asked this before, but if you were king for a day, what would you like to be able to do to sustain this sort of lifestyle and activity? If you could turn around and wave a magic wand, what would be your wish to be able to turn around and continue this sort of lifestyle for you and your family?
That's a good question. I think what I would do is mandate or ensure that governing decisions would be made by fact. And I would feel pretty comfortable knowing that as long as facts and data was what was driving decisions about game management, I'd be pretty confident that my son would be able to follow the same kind of lifestyle if he chose to. That the populations would be there and it would be well taken care of.
Do you worry, or are you concerned about too much government overreach that doesn't look at the facts? Do you see that trending that direction at all, or are you concerned about it?
You definitely see some of that, and where it kind of comes from is if you have Ottawa making decisions, that probably would be better made territorially. You have people that are very removed from this type of lifestyle, very removed from the territory itself, sort of making emotion-based decisions about an area that they've never even been. So that's definitely concerning, and it's something that you do start to see more and more. But I think if those decisions were made more territorially with less influence from people that don't really have a stake in the game, we would be better off for sure.
That it gets into guns as well, firearms. That's probably a whole nother podcast episode. Right. But the discussion on firearms. It's difficult to own a firearm here.
Yeah. So basically, what we have to do here is every 5 years we have to renew a firearms acquisition license. It is acquisition and possession license. So you go through an extensive background checking and all of that type of thing to have a license to be able to own firearms. So once you're a licensed firearm owner in Canada, you're probably one of the most vetted individuals in the country, to be honest. And still they keep passing things to make it more and more difficult for us that are already clearly not criminals. So
yeah, because you don't have like something like what we have in the States, where it's the Second Amendment, which they're still trying to continually undermine, manipulate. They're trying to. There's a lot of people that doesn't think that anybody should own a firearm for any reason. Other people think it should only be for self-defense. Other people say it should be for a well-regulated militia. Some people say for sporting practices is an exemption.
Right.
Up here, it's even a little bit more hard to figure out how you can or what you can, because they've actually put stops on some things that you can't do at all.
Right.
And at the same time, you told me that like black powder stuff and air rifles are considered firearms.
Yep, that's correct. Yep.
Which in the States, they no way, shape, or form are they considered to be a firearm.
Right. Yeah, no, we definitely do not have the same protections that you guys enjoy in terms of that. And it's kind of been a slow fade, where we're only going to start regulating things for the tactical shooting community, the IPSC and the 3-gun guys. And so people kind of sit back and go, well, it doesn't affect my goose hunting shotgun. It doesn't affect my moose rifle. But once they're done with that, they move on to modern sporting firearms. And then once they're done with that, they keep taking pieces of the pie, to a point where right now with our nationwide handgun freeze, it's difficult for licensed law-abiding citizens to even have or carry predator defense, because there's a lot of times, like we were talking about out here, where you can't exactly have, your arms full of a bunch of beaver traps in October and be carrying a rifle at the same time. Well, grizzlies and black bears are very much still awake in October, and it I guess to people back east and in Ottawa making these rules, that doesn't seem like a real big deal, but it certainly can be.
What about the self-defense side of things? I mean, not that it's that big of a threat, but it could be that you're out in a place like this and you run into somebody that wants to cause you harm. The self-defense side of it, it's pretty much mano a mano at that point in time. If you have a firearm, a sidearm, it makes it a little bit more better favorable to you to be able to protect yourself. But I mean, these cabins are in very remote locations. I doubt that somebody's just going to stumble across them. But if they knew where they were, they can utilize them for their own luxury.
Right.
And then they're taking advantage of your personal property or your personal stake. There's no way to protect yourself if you're not able to arm yourself.
Right. And that unfortunately kind of comes back to the way our laws are written. Canadians actually cannot carry any item for the purpose of self-defense. So you literally in Canada could not carry pepper spray if your intention was to defend yourself with it.
Or a knife.
Or a knife. That's right.
Or a hatchet. Or a hammer. Or
yeah. No, the way it's worded, anything carried for the purpose of defense becomes illegal. Illegal.
What are you supposed to do? Just surrender?
I haven't heard any guidelines on what you're supposed to do. I guess call 911.
Yeah. Which they'll be able to find this very easily.
I'm sure the response time would be about 3 days.
Yeah. Yep. And or they'll show up to tag us maybe, or maybe it's just outside of Whitehorse.
Right.
The irony of that is that's supposed to make things safer.
Right.
But it actually creates, just like what we talk about in the States, it creates a criminal that realizes that nobody is armed.
Right.
I'm not saying you have a crime rate up here that's so significant, especially with the limited population, but you could have.
Right.
And you shouldn't be able to turn around and defend yourself no matter what, whether it's from wildlife or whether it's from people.
Right. Yeah. No, it's unfortunate. And that's just the kind of the direction things have taken here, right? It's a very different philosophy. And it'll be interesting to see where that goes in the future.
I mean, I just think about this, that you get some guy that's whacked out on whatever he might be strung out on, sees you coming into town with a load of fur. You're not supposed to turn around and defend yourself or protect your property because he just decides he wants to take it and wants it or needs it more than you do.
Right. Well, legally you could defend yourself once it happens. You just can't carry anything to help you do that.
So, yeah, the lunacy of that statement is almost that. Yeah. That's like saying, to me, I mean, the facetious side of that is that's like saying, we're only going to give you 4 tires for your car. Now you can change the tire, but you can't carry one with you.
Right.
So the reason that we have spare tires is for what we probably think is inevitable, for the worst circumstance.
Right.
The reason we carry firearms for self-defense is the same thing, or a pickaxe or a knife or whatever.
Right.
I find it hard to believe that things have gotten that bad, although I realize that they have.
Right.
But there's cities in the States that have those same type of restrictions or prohibitions. Well, I'm hoping that I don't live long enough to be able to see that sort of stuff come to my.
Right. Yeah. The only thing I would comment on that is cherish your Second Amendment. Definitely cherish it, because the countries that don't have it, which I think is everybody but you, are experiencing a slow but steady chipping away at that. Not just at but the traditions that surround it eventually goes with it as well. So cherish that Second Amendment and really work to keep it.
Do you think you, in your lifetime, from a Canadian standpoint, need to cherish your ability to provide for yourself, the right to hunt and fish, so to speak?
I think we all have to. To be honest, it's something that you can't just take for granted, because there are people that don't want us to be able to have this way of life. So everybody everywhere should cherish it and not take it for granted. Get involved. Whoever's locally, like yourself, whoever's working, on your behalf, get out there and support them. Help out where you can, because if you don't do it, you're just expecting somebody else to do it.
And there's a lot of people out there doing that, expecting somebody else to do it.
Right.
It's not going to happen on my watch, so somebody else is going to take care of it.
Yeah.
You got any particular ambitions, wishes, wants, or desires that you'd like to be able to turn around and accomplish? And, you and I talked about a 30, 60, 90, 120-day plan.
Right.
How about a 1, 2, and 5 year plan for James O'Farrell?
Oh, goodness. A 1, 2, and 5 year plan. That's that would be hard to be concise on, but I would say pretty much just continue doing what we're doing, family wise, and probably start doing a little bit more of the workload, so that my father can start doing a little bit less of the workload. We'll kind of structure that however that works out. But he's worked hard for a long time, and he hopefully can start to scale back just a little bit, and I can take up some of that.
If he's like me, that's probably not in his vocabulary. It's probably, I'm fully capable of doing this. Why are you turning around and fighting?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
You know, what do you think that you have over me?
What's the ulterior motive?
Exactly. Yeah. My son runs the wildlife control business with us, and he does a formidable job. And without him, we would not be able to turn around and do what we've done, nor would he been able to supply for himself as formidably as well. It's a give and take. A lot of times there was headbutting along the way, but we enjoyed it. We love each other, and we want to make sure that we complement each other at the same time as provide backup.
Right.
We really believe. I think that we really believe that we're each other's wingmen.
Right.
And just from the 10, 12 days that I've spent with you, I can see that there's a lot of similarities that you really respect, you really love, and at the same time that you've often butted heads with for different reasons, but you've done it for the same outcome because you really, really care about this sort of lifestyle.
Right, for sure. Yeah.
And do you see your kid coming up to that level that he wants to be like dad and grandpa?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yep. You know, and I'd be happy with anything that he decides to do with his life. But he's snaring rabbits and you know, practicing with his BB gun, and so he's going right along. Fishing's probably his favorite thing to do on earth. So it's that and climb trees. So
that and climb trees. The fishing camp is a good way to turn around and become an expert fisherman.
Yeah, and it's just, you know, it's good for kids. It's a great place to, you know, grow up on a lake and yeah, a lot of good memories. It's hard to beat growing up on a lake as a kid.
Yeah. What's your favorite season?
I don't think I really have one. We were kind of talking earlier about once it starts to warm up, which is doing a little bit unseasonally now, but you know, as the snow starts to melt, you just kind of feel like it's getting into fishing season, and you know, you're not really sad to see the snow go, but you know, it just is kind of what it is. And then as the leaves start to turn, it's look around and think it's frosty, time to go looking for moose.
Mm-hmm.
So everything kind of comes and goes with the seasons, and it's kind of been a good way. It's almost like an internal clock kind of thing that,
it breaks up the monotony. You're not making Rubik's cubes 365 days a year.
Right.
There's always something to go along with it that makes it different. And I think that that's the same thing. It's I think that one reason why you and I have hit it off is because we have similar lifestyles in completely different settings.
Right.
With our line of work, it's something different every single day.
Yep.
With your line of work, it's something different every single day, even though to some it might seem monotonous.
Right.
But it's something different every single day.
Yep.
I was thinking just, you know, traveling behind you on the machine. I remember saying, and I'll probably get it wrong, but looking at the trap line from a young kid of 12, and living out what I wanted to do as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And then going through that whole process for the last 50 some odd years, and then looking at the trap line from the eyes of a 61-year-old, I still look at it from the eyes of a kid of what I remember as we were traveling through, and I was looking at the old sets and I was picking stuff out that you already had or that you were doing. It's a lifestyle that has created such an internal component of my existence ever since I did what I did when reading books that you and I talk about,
right?
About the life experiences of the pathfinders and the explorers and the fur traders and the trappers and the guides and so forth. I looked at those stories from the eyes of a 12-year-old wanting to live that.
Right.
I'm successful, 50 some odd years later, but still look at it through the eyes of a 12-year-old, but with a graying old man. And I hope you get a chance to do that, and I hope your kid gets a chance to do that. And I think just me not meeting your dad, I'm sure that he's been able to do that as well. So
yep.
Take advantage of that, because that's something to where it's a lifelong experience that you get to turn around and relish and savor,
right.
And experience it with yourself or with your loved ones as well.
Right. Yeah. No, that's kind of part of the magic of the whole thing, right? It keeps its newness, you know. Yeah, you learn a lot along the way, but there's always a lot more to learn, and it's that wonder is kind of still there. That's really neat.
Well, I appreciate you guys taking the time to allow me to come up and travel around with you and kind of get a little bit of a feeling. It's not what the weather I thought was going to be. It's a lot warmer than what we had anticipated.
Right.
I bought $300 pair of 100 below boots that I didn't bring, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
But this has been a really unique experience. It's been a pleasure to get to know you. I think that through our conversations, we're going to be able to turn around and blossom a friendship that is probably long lasting.
For sure.
Whether I come up or you come down, or we just communicate back and forth. And Joe, my wife says, okay, enough. And your wife says enough.
Stop scheming.
Yeah. Stop scheming. No more plotting. And
Yeah.
but there's a lot to be said about savoring the moment and savoring the lifestyle, because not everybody gets a chance to experience what you have.
Right.
And I just wanted to share a little bit about that. This is not the normal podcast studio by any.
Right.
The sound might not be as good, but I think it's well worth the effort to turn around and show people different perspectives and different lifestyles. And through our Instagram and our Facebook and our YouTube pages and all the Spotify's and everything else that we've got, we're going to try to share some of the video and the photographs and so forth. And we hope that you'd be able to turn around and share that stuff as well, because
Right.
I think it's an experience that the majority of people would appreciate. I think the lifestyle that you've created for you and your family is what people could acknowledge, that this is an individual's choice to be able to do this.
Right.
And they're doing it from a highly regulated perspective, and they're doing it from a conservation-minded perspective, and you get to turn around and do it the way you want to do it, not the way somebody's telling you. Right. So I just appreciate the friendship so far, and I look forward to future conversations. And in the meantime, this is a special episode of Through the Gate, and we hope that you find this entertaining. You can look up Grizzly Creek Lodge, and they've got their fishing trips and stuff online. And hopefully through our Instagram and Facebook accounts, you'll be able to turn around and see some of the stuff that we've been able to accomplish over the course of the last 10 or 12 days. So, James, thanks again. Appreciate it.
Been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Through the Gates. For more content like this, make sure that you like, follow, and subscribe on all of our channels.
Hopefully it recorded.
Yeah. Yes.
We'll be so polished by the time we get to the fourth one.
So I have to stay another 3 weeks to be able to turn on.